All stand, please. Please be seated.
Yes, thanks, Mr. Reid. Thank you, Your Honour. Dr. Marsden-Smedley. You right?
Yep.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Dr. Marsden-Smedley, a high intensity fire at its lower end. So we're talking about a 30 metres a minute fire.
Right.
Thank you. What effect on that fire if it runs into a fire break 1.5 tractor widths wide?
I would anticipate that other than some very short-term reduction in spread, it would then spot across and keep going with overall minimal impact.
Thank you. The witness please be shown document 120134. This, Dr. Marsden-Smedley, is your December report. And I wanted to, I have
13.
Clearly, it should be document 13. Sorry. Yes, thank you. Yep. We go down to 4.2.3, and you've said that the photographs and text of the TFS fire investigation report clearly showing evidence of recent fire in routes at these locations. The photographs that you've seen do not show anything in relation to neither the photographs nor the text would assist you in reaching a conclusion that there was evidence of recent fire in the routes.
That is not my recollection of the TFS fire investigation report. My recollection is that they did show evidence and photographs of recent burn.
Right, thank you. Have a look at page 139 of this document at 4.3.4, and there you engage with Mr. Gilmore's discussion about the fire's length and width, and you opine that when bushfires first start, it's normal for the fire to switch between head and flank fires, resulting in a wider fire than may be the case once the fire is established.
Yes.
Could you have a look, please, at document 108, page 159? That's D11, Your Honour. Thank you. Now, the top, that's just been enlarged to the top oval shape. Do you agree that depicts the typical spread of an initial grass fire?
That is a average fire shape that you'd expect in the very early phases, particularly for a grass fire.
And in the very early phases of the fire that you have opined starts at or near the stump, it was just that, a grass fire.
I would have anticipated that it would have been a mixed grass and eucalypt litter fire.
Yes, yes, I'm sorry you did say that before. I wasn't meaning to shoehorn you into something smaller in that question. Now, could we go to page 130 of that report. No, sorry, back to document 12, I'm sorry. Mr. Tempone, my apologies. Page 130. And hopefully this is the December report that we're looking at. Document 13. I've made that error a couple of times. Apologies. Page 0130. Page 0130.
4.1.11, paragraph 4.
Yes, that's it, Your Honour. Now, Dr. Marsden-Smedley, it's your understanding that the arrow that you referred to in that paragraph 4.1.11 depicts the movement, the direction of movement of the fire across that arrow.
Yes, that is my understanding. I believe it was a green arrow painted on the ground.
Thank you. Now, you then refer to what you would expect from some waypoints that you took.
Yes.
This is again in discussion of an alternate area of origin proposed by Mr. Gilmore.
Yes.
Thank you. And you think his possibility is highly unlikely to be correct because if the fire had started in this vicinity, I would have expected an easterly fire spread direction at my waypoints 12 and 13 and a northeasterly spread direction at my waypoints 2 and 3.
Yes.
Now, could we please have a look at the previous page, 129, and that is your waypoint 2, the left side of those photographs.
Yes.
And can you identify that by reference to other photographs as the tree around which the pink ribbon was run?
Are you referring to the photographs in the TFS fire investigation report where they showed somebody standing beside a tree?
No, I'm referring to the photograph with the green arrow and 2 pink lines.
I would have to compare. I would have to compare it myself to be sure of that, but I think that's probable.
Right. Okay. Well, now, can we have a look then at document, not for that purpose, but for the purpose of getting up the image of waypoint 0002, document 104 to JPEG 2756.
Yes.
And that's the image that you... No, it's probably not, is it?
That's
Shadows
probably
are in a
just
different
zoomed
direction.
back.
Yes, yes.
Enlarging map 1 not sufficient for your purposes?
We could certainly do that, yes.
Try it.
Yes. I really just want to identify the photograph, Your Honour. There's no great purpose about this because I'm going elsewhere.
Well, that probably wouldn't be sufficiently detailed. But
No. Well, in any event, Dr. Marsden-Smedley, that's the same tree.
That's right.
Yes. As shown in waypoint 2. And you would have expected to find a northeasterly fire spread direction at that waypoint if Mr. Gilmore's possibility of the fire starting in the vicinity of the log pile or septic line was correct.
That's right, not an east-southeast.
Yes. Now, if we go, please, to page 132. Is this the December report?
Yes.
Yes, thank you. Yes, sorry. I've obviously added the pages up incorrectly. 131, sorry. Yes, thank you. Now, if we enlarge that map with the arrows, what we see against waypoint 2 is a direction of travel, in fact, that you would have expected to see if Mr Gilmore was correct, don't we?
No, I would have expected it to be more of a northeasterly, and that is a east-northeast.
Right.
Not a northeast.
Well, if we have a look then at your notebook, which is page 0178, the bearing is 75 degrees. That's what you noted.
Yes,
Yes.
that is just north of east.
Yes, which you would have...
Excuse me, Your Honour, that's the witness. In fact, can the witness see? I'm sorry, Mr. Reid has referred to a wrong page. I just wasn't sure if the witness could see the correct page.
I think it's just above.
Of his notes.
Yes, I can't see into the witness box, Your Honour.
Yes.
I don't know whether Dr. Marston-Smith is looking at page 176
I
or
was
178.
absolutely unaware that I'd referred to the wrong page, and I was certainly not attempting to trap the witness.
Right. Okay, well, we'll just try it again.
Let's try again. I have it at 0178. What? 176. Yes.
Yes.
And if we can enlarge the right-hand, well, I don't think we need to. It can be, no, the next page, please. That's it. In fact, I think we had to split the difference. Must have been 177. Thank you. And that's 75 degrees.
That's right.
Yes, thank you. And that was the record you made on site.
That's right.
Yes. Now,
But that's not northeast.
it's not. It's 75 degrees.
That's right.
Yes. But nor is it east-southeast.
That's right. Yes, I was
As you've
incorrect when I said that a few minutes ago.
Yes.
I was just looking at the tree and my memory of the site, and I'm now being reminded of my notebook, which is 75 degrees.
Excuse me for a moment, Your Honour. Yes, please.
Yes, thank you. Mr. Armstrong.
Thank you, Your Honour. Now, Dr. Marston-Smedley, you were asked some questions about the possibility that there had been a fire that started at about 1:30 p.m. on the 3rd of January and started in the area that you've described as Dunalley Park. Could I ask Mr. Temponi to bring up Court Book Document 138? Now, Doctor, the point on that map that's indicated by number 11 represents the assumption that you had made regarding the point of ignition of what we might call the 1:30 fire. Is that correct?
That's right.
Right. Now, if a fire had ignited in that area at about 1:30 p.m, could you tell His Honour, over the course of firstly the next half hour, so between 1:30 and 2 o'clock, what you would have expected in terms of spotting ahead of that theoretical fire?
I would have anticipated that there would not have been a lot of spotting in the first about half an hour as the fire steadily built up. But after that time, I would expect the starting of short-range spotting, and then by the time it had been burning for an hour, significant spotting.
Thank you. And next, Dr. Marsden-Smedley, a fire ignited at that point 11. In terms of its progression from west towards the east, having regard to the various locations that you've identified on the map there, could you describe for His Honour what path you would have expected the fire would have needed to take in order to progress across to the area beyond number 9 on the map?
The fire, I would have expected, would burn as a cone-shaped, i.e. coming out from a point and expanding out in pretty much a straight easterly direction, because that was the prevailing wind direction, such that by the time it got to the locality of where 6 and 9, that distance looks to me to be about 250 metres. And so I would have anticipated that the fire front by that stage would have been around at least 100 to 150 metres wide.
Thank you. And once it hit that, I think we can see on the map there that there's an area of cleared ground around numbers 9 and 6. Once it hit that area, can you explain to His Honour where you would expect the fire would then have travelled?
I would still be anticipating that it would be moving in an easterly direction, and under those conditions I would anticipate that it would have burnt across that cleared area.
At 4,
At 9 and 6.
at
Your
9 and 6. Yes.
At 9 and 6.
I see the cleared area, the paddock.
Yes.
Yes.
The area shown as number 4 was recently burnt in
Yes.
October.
Yes.
Yes.
And Doctor, still assuming that the fire ignited at around point 11 at around 1:30 p.m, what time would you estimate that fire front would have reached the area of cleared land at numbers 9 and 6?
I haven't got my spreadsheet open in front of me, so I would only go on my memory. I would have anticipated that it would have burnt across to there in something in the region of 30 to approximately 30 minutes, because the site there is reasonably flat. So yes, about half an hour, at maximum of say 45 minutes.
Thank you. Now, earlier in my learned friend's questions, Dr. Marsden-Smedley, you referred to the Haynes index and the mechanism of convection
Yes.
effects with fires. Now, can I ask you firstly, and perhaps you might need to give us all a little bit of Meteorology 101, but could you explain to His Honour, please, why is it that a bushfire will cause high, dry air to behave in the way that you described? Perhaps if you could start from the basics and explain to us the levels of air up there and how they're affected by heat down here.
Trying to keep it at Meteorology 101, the reason why we have the Haynes index is that it's an extremely complex phenomena, and so this has been simplified down into a simple index. But in its essence, when an atmosphere is unstable, a parcel of air that rises will end up being warmer than the surrounding air, which means that it will be of lower pressure, so it'll want to keep rising. A stable atmosphere is the opposite, where when a parcel of air rises, it ends up being cooler than the surrounding, so therefore it wants to go down to its original height. Now, under unstable conditions, when a fire comes in and starts burning, the hot air coming off the fire rises, and because it cools at a slower rate than the surrounding air, as it rises, it remains warmer and less dense than the surrounding air as it gains altitude. So therefore, it increases its upward rate of spread. Now, you're not going to get a vacuum at the ground surface. Something has to come in to replace the air at the ground surface. What comes back in is air drawn in from higher altitudes, which as it comes down, it warms at the adiabatic lapse rate of approximately 10 degrees C per 1,000 metres. So when it comes down from high altitude, it ends up being warm, and because it hasn't picked up any more moisture, it ends up being very low humidity. So you get the effect of high wind speed, low humidity air coming in to the fire, and that effectively supercharges the level of fire behaviour. So you get a very rapid increase in the rate of spread and intensity under those highly unstable conditions.
And I take it, Doctor, that the supercharging effect is because of the high winds now effectively fanning the bushfire at ground level.
Well, it's because of the lack of humidity, isn't it?
It's to do with both. The wind speed is the biggest one effect,
Yep.
but humidity would be the second, yes.
And Doctor, can you explain to His Honour roughly how big a bushfire would need to become before it starts to produce the effects that you've just described?
This is an area of current research which has not yet been finalised. However, in my experience, I would anticipate that a fire of 2 to 5 hectares under the wind speeds and humidity prevailing on that day would start to couple the atmosphere significantly, and so therefore would start to bring in the high wind speed, low humidity air to increase the effective rate of spread and intensity.
Thank you. You've actually taken me to my next question. You refer to coupling. Could you
Yes.
explain that phenomenon, please?
Coupling is where you break down any inversion that's present in the atmosphere. Now, an inversion is where you end up getting where you have a stable, cool layer of air at some distance above the ground surface. And what that does is effectively isolate the ground surface from the air above. Now, when an atmosphere couples, it gets inversion is broken and removed such that the whole atmosphere is responding to the prevailing wind and humidity conditions of the atmosphere. So that if you have dry, high wind speed air aloft, it comes down to the ground surface.
Thank you. Now, lastly, Dr. Marsden-Smedley, in terms of your fire behaviour modelling, the Project Vesta modelling that you've adopted and the other models that you've worked with and evaluated over the years,
Yes.
could you explain to His Honour what level of predictive accuracy do you assess the models that you've adopted to have in terms of actually predicting where this fire actually was at any given point in time?
It depends on the model used. Now, in my experience, the Project Vesta model has demonstrated a much higher level of predictive confidence than any of the other models. Now, that is not surprising when you consider the effort and work that went into developing that model. What happened was that there was an Australia-wide research project run by the lead agency was the CSIRO, and they set up over a period of years in Western Australia a whole series of large plots which they burnt under a wide range of conditions. And the idea was that they did simultaneous fires under different conditions under the same prevailing meteorological conditions, so that they could actually isolate and model what the actual drivers are of the different fire levels of fire behaviour. Now, once they had done that, they then got together a lot of information from higher intensity wildfires, bushfires, and then modelled the fire behaviour over that wide range of conditions. The analysis was done by a Dr. Wendy Anderson, who is the top fire behaviour statistician worldwide. The project was led by a Mr. Phil Cheney, and that research was then published in the Canadian journal Forest Ecology and Management in 2012. I might add that that journal is a peer-reviewed journal, and one of the peer reviewers was myself. I was actually asked by that journal to do an independent peer review of that paper prior to publication. As such, I have done a detailed analysis of the relationships within the model, and as part of that, I have a very high confidence in the model. That is not the case with the models like the Phoenix Rapid Fire model, which has not been peer reviewed and has been shown, including by my work, to have a lower utility in predicting fire behaviour.
Thank you. Now, what, if any, kind of variation would you ordinarily expect to observe between the location of fire front predicted by your model in the very early stages of a fire like we are dealing with here at Fawcett and the actual location of the fire?
The difference between the observed and predicted location for a fire will depend to a very large extent on the quality of the inputs you use to predict the fire, and also the accuracy of your observers as well. So in this case, where there are automatic weather stations at Hobart Airport fairly close to the fire, which means that and because the atmosphere was well coupled and mixed on the day, because of those conditions, you can be pretty confident that the weather conditions recorded at Hobart Airport would be applicable across fairly extensive parts of southeast Tasmania. And I have also tried to rebuild the level of fuel hazard that would have been prevailing during the fires. And because I have a pretty high confidence in both of those parameters, I would anticipate a high confidence in the predictions that are made.
Thank you. Now, one last question back on the previous topic of spotting. Doctor, could the operator please bring back up Court Book 138? Now, Dr. Marsden-Smedley, would you agree with me that point 11 on the map is slightly up a rise from the structures that we see denoted at points 9 and 6 on the map?
I have not put contours on that map, but my memory is that once you get down to close to 11, the ground is reasonably flat, I thought.
All right, thank you. And then if I could then draw your attention to the area between point 11 and the black star that you've indicated as the fire ignition site just next to point 1. What is your recollection of the topography between those two locations?
It's a downslope from the ignition point at 1 to 11.
Okay. Perhaps we might bring up one of the topographical maps. Could we bring up document 136, please? Now, Doctor, can you identify for His Honour what this map shows?
That is the base map there is the 1 to 50,000 emergency services map that covers all of Tasmania.
Thank you. And if the operator could please zoom into about the middle of the photograph so that we've got White Hill Road and a little bit closer. And then can you identify, in fact, perhaps Mr. Temponi could take a screenshot for us, and I'll get you to draw on this map, Doctor.
Might I suggest you slightly go lower down, because you can only just see Dunalley Park on that map.
Sure, thank you. Shall we zoom in a little bit, Doctor?
Yes.
And perhaps, do we need to go across to the left?
Yes, if you go slightly more and then go down a little bit, you'll get Dunalley Park in the middle of the screen.
Down a little bit further, please, Mr. Temponi.
That's about it, I
We'll
think,
stop
isn't
about
it?
there.
That's about it?
Yep.
Now, Mr. Temponi could take a screenshot for us and we'll draw on it. Down a bit further. A bit further. Down to the next black line, please. Thank you. I'll take that. Now, Doctor, could you direct Mr. Temponi to put the cursor at the location of the fire ignition site?
Okay, go down, 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 stop. Now go left, left one more square. Go down slightly, halfway, down a bit, very, very slightly left. Well, not, that's the house just to the left, I believe, is 242 Whitehill Road. So if you go very slightly left, left, stop, about there, I believe.
So could we put an X there, please, Mr. Temponi? So roughly there.
Yes.
And then could we next try and mark the Lawrence property, which was number 9 on the previous map?
That is fairly close to the intersection of 2 grid lines. If you go up, now I'll go right. It is, to my knowledge, now keep going right. Oh, no, up a fraction and very slightly right, very slightly. I believe it's there.
All right, thank you. Can we mark another X there, please, Mr. Temponi? Now, again, Dr. Marsden-Smedley, in the area between those 2 X marks, we saw that the number 11 mark was slightly to the northeast of the lower of the X's that we've just marked. And then do you recall, or can you tell from this map, whether the ground between the number 11 point and 242 Whitehills Road is a one continuous slope, or do the topographical lines indicate some other kind of shape to the topography?
It looks to me like there is a shallow valley pointing towards the southeast, but it's not steep country.
All right, thank you. Now, comparing the positions between 242 Whitehills Road and the location that was identified as number 11 on the preceding map, if we can go back to, in fact, can I tender that one, Your Honour? And then could we go back to document 138? All right, thank you. Now, comparing the ignition location at 242 Whitehills Road and the hypothetical ignition location at about point 11 on that photograph, Dr. Marsden-Smedley. Could you explain to His Honour, in the first half hour or so of a fire igniting at either of those points, taking them each in turn, could you tell His Honour whether you would expect any difference between them in terms of spotting behaviour?
Your Honour, this doesn't arise. I didn't ask about spotting behaviour in relation to these fires.
You're probably right, but I'll allow the question. I'll give you a right to further cross-examine.
I would anticipate that in the first half hour that a fire starting at point 1, 242 Whitehill Road, initially it's burning downhill, and so in that first half hour I would expect that that would be retarding the rate of fire spread and intensity to some extent. At the point 11, my memory of the topography is that it was less of a downhill slope, but I need to emphasise that I have been to the point 1 and I have been in the valley in the area to the southeast of point 1, but I have not been to the point 11 on the ground.
Thank you. And then lastly, Dr. Marsden-Smedley, what about that same question, but in the second half hour of each of the fires?
Then I would anticipate that the spotting on both scenarios would be increasing, and probably to a similar extent on both fires.
Thank you. Nothing further, Your Honour.
Yes, thank you. Anything arising?
No, there isn't. Thank you.
Yes.
May Dr. Marsden-Smedley be excused?
Thank you so much, Dr. Marsden-Smedley. You're relieved on the trial, which means that you're free to go, but you're perfectly free to stay and observe if you wish to.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Now, Your Honour, subject to the issue regarding Mr. Hall, who's still off doing his homework as we understand it, and subject to one further matter that I'm about to mention, that's the evidence for the plaintiffs. Now, the further matter that I wanted to mention is just that my learned junior and my instructors are liaising with Mr. Brewer and his instructors about the question of quantum and an agreed statement as to exactly what is being resolved by those discussions. And so I just need to sort of put that on notice. We're not calling Ms. Daly, for instance, or Mr. Kennelly, because of our expectation that the quantum issue is resolved. We just need to make sure that we've got the right language. So subject to that, Your Honour, that is the evidence for the plaintiffs.
Well, you're really asking me to reserve to you the right to reopen if there is a breakdown in communication as to the question of quantum.
Yes, I should have been more explicit. Yes, Your Honour.
Thank you, Mr. Reid.
Yes, that's perfectly proper.
Yes, all right.
Let's hope there is no breakdown.
No, well, that's the that's the course I'll take. Thank you. Now, Mr. Reid, are you in a position to proceed, or do you want some time?
Your Honour, I'm in a position to open, provided my instructor can hand me a document. We don't have a witness until 2:15, so we might have a slightly longer lunch because I don't intend to open any great length at all. My opening, Your Honour, really is to introduce the way in which the evidence will unroll in the defence case, going towards effectively the key issues that I opened on, and I don't repeat. Following this opening, in fact after lunch, Ms. Barrett will give evidence. She's the only witness that we have organised for today. Tomorrow morning it's intended to call Mr. Thomas. Now, Mr. Thomas has authored some reports, Your Honour, and if I could take Your Honour to them.
Just give me a moment to look at the latest exhibit list. Yes, I just wanted to make sure that Ms Barrett's records of interview had both been tendered, and they have.
Yeah.
So,
Yes. My heart missed a beat there, Your Honour.
Sorry?
My heart missed a beat, in case they hadn't been.
Oh, well, I mean, I regarded them as being tendered. I watched them and I read the transcripts,
Yes.
but I just had a nagging doubt as to whether they'd actually been tendered in that sort of area of the beginning of the trial. We weren't sure about how we were announcing the exhibits. Yes, sorry, please go on. So you'll be calling Ms Barrett?
Yes. Then tomorrow morning, Mr Colin Thomas, and he has provided 3 reports, Your Honour, which I would invite you to read.
Yes.
Before he gives his evidence. They won't take long. A little bit of opinion, mainly factual. And following Mr Thomas, we will move potentially to another witness in relation to the excavation, but that will depend upon what occurred, what's put to Mr Thomas. We don't intend to duplicate things unnecessarily. We have a delightful lady known as Eileen Bresnahan tomorrow afternoon. In fact, we might have to bring her forward to tomorrow morning. She was travelling down Whitehill Road with her husband, who is an invalid now, and they saw, or she saw, because she'll be giving the evidence, she saw fire on Barrett's property, went into Wendell Wright's place, which is where we stopped to look at the container, Your Honour. That's the Wrights have got 2 residences there. She went into Wendell's place and said, please ring 000. 000 was rung. She then got back in the car. They drove off and passed the responding brigades as they drove on. So that's the nature of her evidence. We will also be calling the police forensic photographer from the 6th, Mr Needham, and sorry, Your Honour, I'm not used to using these computers. Can you just have to get this fixed for me? And a Mr Stephen Lowe may be called tomorrow afternoon. We'll reconsider whether he's needed in the light of some answers that Dr Marston's Medley gave. On Monday morning, we intend to call Mr Peter Sutcliffe, who's the man who sees the 130 fire. Ms Fotheringham, I should say, who will give evidence about her sighting from her house and timings. We also intend on Monday to call the second defendant, Mr Robinson, and the intention is to play his video at that stage rather than playing it now. We may be calling an arborist, Mr Jackson. I don't invite you to read his report at the moment. And the final witness will be most probably Mr Gilmore, who you've heard about, the expert witness. So I'd be reasonably satisfied that the evidence could finish by Tuesday. It may well go into Thursday, given that we're not sitting Wednesday. So that's, I'd be very surprised if we're still in evidence the following week.
How long will council require to prepare closing submissions? Mr. Armstrong?
I'm instructed that if it's convenient to Your Honour, we would take a week, but we'll do it in less time if the court would prefer.
Yes, well, I'll see what Mr. Reid thinks.
It won't take longer than a week, Your Honour, and should take less.
Oh, sorry, won't take.
Oh, no,
Yes,
certainly won't take longer.
Yes. Well,
No, it might be we may, if my predictions that we'll finish the evidence next week, then I would expect him in a position to provide to exchange written documents and file them probably by the Tuesday of the following week, Your Honour.
okay.
The 18th. But if my learned friend needs longer, then I don't want to sandwich him.
I want to get reasons out in this matter quickly.
Yes.
And of course my commitments start to build up after the time that's been allowed for the hearing of this matter. If we were to finish the evidence on Thursday, we should be able to have closing addresses the following Friday.
Oh, most definitely, Your Honour.
The 21st.
Your Honour, I could certainly do the 21st. If it were convenient to Your Honour and my learned friend, I wonder whether the following Monday would be possible. It's just that I have a commitment in Melbourne on Thursday the 20th that...
Right.
We'll do the 19th.
Yeah. I can't do the Monday.
In that case, Your Honour, we'll take the 20th.
You've got a commitment on the 20th.
Sorry, the Friday the 21st.
Friday the 23rd.
Yes, we'll take the 21st, Your Honour.
What about Friday the 21st at 11:30am?
Oh, I would come down the night before anyway, Your Honour, so happy to start at 10 a.m.
Okay. All right, well, that's what we'll do then.
Thank you, Your Honour. The other thing which was implicit and perhaps explicit in what I said was a proposal that we exchange and file written submissions and come in almost essentially to answer questions that Your Honour might have.
Yeah. Well, that gives me plenty of time. So that's good.
I should just say, Your Honour, while we're on the topic of paperwork, Your Honour mentioned, I think on the first day of the trial, the likely utility of a chronology. I'm sure that my learned friend's team has been working on theirs. We've been working on one for our part. And we'll probably be in a position to circulate a draft for comment, at least reflecting the evidence as at the close of our case.
Yes.
If not later today, then tomorrow. I emphasise it will just be a draft. We'll no doubt continue to work on it as we progress through my learned friend's case. But if it's of any assistance to Your Honour, we certainly provide it.
Well, I'm happy to receive it at any time that's convenient to council, but perhaps no later than the plaintiffs the plaintiff's reply, if any.
Yes. In any event, Your Honour, we imagine that the final version of the chronology would form an annexure to our final written submissions.
Yeah.
So I just mentioned that to let Your Honour know that we'll provide it in draft if it's of assistance.
You're querying a quick question of a reply.
Well, ordinarily I would be going first.
Sorry, it'll be your reply.
Yes.
Thank you.
Yes.
Well, no later than your reply if there is one, but hopefully attached to the plaintiff's written submissions as an annexure.
Yes.
Right, now did you say that Ms Barrett's the only witness for this afternoon?
Yes.
And how long do you expect that she might take?
I won't be terribly long with her in chief. Let's say half an hour.
Yeah. I'm just wondering whether I have sufficient time to read the reports from Mr. Thomas.
And I didn't invite you to read Mr. Gilmore, but he's coming next week, and I do invite you to read him.
Well, that's not a problem. Although it just depends. Yes, anyway, well, look, I'll make a decision this afternoon, but it may be we'll need to start a bit later in the morning if I'm to read Mr. Thomas's reports between now and then. He's your witness in the morning?
Yes, yes. I'd anticipated it would take 15 minutes to read his report.
Oh, is that all?
Yes.
Okay, all right.
Yes,
Well, then I should go.
nothing like Dr. Marsden's Hadley's detail. No.
All right, thank you. Well, then I'll adjourn until 2:15.
Stand, please. Someone will report our plans adjourned to 2:15 p.m.